I served the last few years of my settled ministry at King's Chapel in Boston, which has a legitimate claim to being the first Unitarian church in the New World. A few of you may have visited. Oh, not as many as I might think. Well, there's a pulpit into which the minister climbs each Sunday, a high pulpit, which I did a little research on this, and I thought I knew all the facts and figures, but I found out that that pulpit was installed in 1717, so 3 decades next year. And from that pulpit, a famous series of 4 lectures was delivered in February of 1926, a mere 90 years ago, by the eminent mathematician and process philosopher Alfred North Whitehead, later published as a book entitled Religion in the Making. And what is probably the most quoted passage from those lectures was this: "Religion is what the individual does with his own solitariness. Religion is solitariness, and if you are never solitary, you are never religious. Collective enthusiasms, revivals, institutions, churches, rituals, Bibles, codes of behavior are the trappings of religion, its passing forms. They may be useful or harmful. They may be authoritatively ordained, or merely temporary expedients. But the end of religion is beyond all this. Accordingly, what should emerge from religion is individual worth of character." Now, at the time Whitehead spoke at King's Chapel, the word character figured prominently in what was at that time, without question, the most well-known summary statement of American Unitarianism. This would be in the late 19th century through at least the first 30, 40 years of the 20th century. This was a 5-part affirmation entitled Our Faith. Nobody ever voted it in. Somehow it just appeared. It appeared in the form of an enormous plaque entitled Our Faith. It was composed near the end of the 19th century by a leading Boston minister, James Freeman. Clark's affirmation, which all Unitarians of a certain age back then committed to heart, read, quote, "Our faith, listen to this, the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, the leadership of Jesus, salvation by character, and the progress of mankind onward and upward forever." That plaque hung in the walls of most Unitarian churches for at least 30 or 40 years. When I first came upon this, I had heard that, I'd seen this in my childhood and stuff in various churches. But in St. Louis, when I finally, I don't know why, I talked about this one time, some people went down into the boiler room and they came to me and they said, "We found it." Some of the older people actually remembered it when it was still hung there, but they found it behind the furnace somewhere, something like that. So, now, among other things, this affirmation gave rise to a famous parody describing Unitarianism as the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, and the neighborhood of Boston. But there are a few other things about this statement worth noting, besides the fact that most contemporary Unitarians or Unitarian Universalists are, to say the least, startled to learn that not so long ago it was widely accepted as a normative statement of our common faith. But this led me to the thought that, hard as it may be for us to imagine, it could be that the language we use to describe ourselves today, purposes and principles and all, will sound equally foreign to those who will succeed us a century from now. Who knows? Dated as Clark's affirmation is, though, it does have some virtues. First to note is that although Unitarianism was then and is now often criticized for being coldly rational, and Unitarians lampooned as, quote, God's frozen people, Clarke's language is remarkably warm and personal. The human connection to the divine is expressed in terms of the intimacy of a parental relationship. And the essence of human interrelationship is expressed in terms of brotherhood, understood then to mean belief in the essential unity of the whole human family. Though Unitarians then, as now, varied in their individual beliefs about the nature of Christ's divinity, commonly they believed in Jesus as a human leader, spiritually present with us, whom we follow much as we might follow a revered elder brother. And finally it says, we are humanly bound together in a common journey towards a higher and holier good, though more than tinged with that late 19th century progressive optimism which would be so seriously challenged by the horrors of the bloody century to follow. We have learned that it is not onward and upward forever. Second, although Unitarianism is often felt to stress negation of traditional religious beliefs, Clarke's language is entirely positive and affirmative. It accomplishes, I think, a subtle redefinition of traditional theological concepts without abandoning traditional theological language. And finally, I suggest today, since it's the title of my sermon, that we consider the penultimate phrase, salvation by character, as the hinge around which the whole statement revolves, and the central affirmation of Unitarian theology. As Whitehead put it, what should emerge from religion is individual worth of character. The phrase salvation by character is an attempt to build a theological bridge connecting what are usually presented as the distinct alternatives of salvation by faith alone versus salvation by works alone. Or as I would restate it, perhaps too simply, we are saved neither by what we believe nor by what we do, but by who we are. Character is the ultimate achievement of our life, and the gradual growing of who we were meant to be, the shaping of our soul, if you will, is the fundamental religious task. To say it another way, each of us not only has a legacy, but is a legacy. Each of us has a unique task to fulfill in the living of our life. We are shaped by our relationship to the past, but also to the present and even to the future. And who we are in our essential and true being, character, matters more than the conditions of our past and even more than the particular accomplishments of our life. Your being, in its essence, is your character, which is the achievement of a lifetime, and that character ultimately defines and becomes the meaning of your life. And the belief that we each individually have the power and capacity and the responsibility to shape that character, to make something noble and ennobling of our lives, seems to me a uniquely defining essence of what Unitarianism, particularly American Unitarianism, has been. It is a faith, and to be sure, an optimistic faith, but not a theology. And it has surprisingly little to do with theology. It is defined more by certain attitudes than by particulars of belief. It needs to be said, I think, that these attitudes, some of them at least, are profoundly challenged by some of the presumptions of the world we seem to be living in today. In the first place, they rest on a sense of the profound value of each individual, which seems to have gone out of intellectual fashion. We live in an era which regularly demeans individualism in both subtle and obvious ways. We are increasingly encouraged to identify ourselves less as individuals and more as members of groups, defined by such things as race, color, social class, even by our generation. If you're a boomer, you're expected to believe certain things and hold certain attitudes. If you are of Generation X or millennial or whatever, you're supposed to like something else or somebody else or think like everybody else. We speak more and more about groups or categories of people rather than individual persons. We talk about the privileged, the marginalized, the poor, single-parent families, as if these were the defining qualities of people's existence. We adopt hyphenated descriptions of our presumed parentage, connecting ourselves to racial categories or ethnic heritages. Even among our tiny little denominational family, we have subgroups. Buddhist you use, humanist you use, pagan you use, green you use, blue, red, and yellow you use. And then we talk about wanting to achieve diversity, meaning not diversity of individuals, but diversity of representatives of groups. Group identity and group definition become ways of not seeing and not valuing people in their uniqueness as individuals. Character is not defined by any of this. Character is an accumulation of self, formed not from the conditions of our existence, but by our unique response to those conditions. The daily decisions which gradually, like water dripping on a rock, create the shape of who we are. To stress character is to believe that we are products, but not victims of our past. Character has nothing to do with the division of people into categories and everything to do with what is unique and uniquely precious in each individual soul. So to the extent that we still find meaning in the idea of salvation by character, I still do, we are at odds in a fundamental way with the way we are being encouraged to think about our life now. When you begin to focus more on categories of persons than individual persons, sooner or later, I think, you begin to rank those categories and then to judge them. And before you know it, you're likely to begin dividing them into like us or not like us. But from my perspective, there aren't any people who are not like us, not in essence. There may be people with different ideas, different fears, different goals than I have, but that is true, I believe, of people sitting right here in this room, too. We believe many different things. We are not here because we think the same things in common. We are here, I hope, because here we feel some freedom to be ourselves and to become ourselves, to be challenged as well as affirmed by others who think similarly to us, and also those who think differently than we do. As I would restate it, we are saved neither by what we believe nor by what we do, but by who we are. Character is the ultimate achievement of our life. And the gradual growing of who we were meant to be, the shaping of our soul, if you will, is the fundamental religious task. The power of this faith, or this way of being faithful, is the power of influence, the power of character shaping character. Our character is shaped by all our life experiences, but especially the influence of those people we encounter in our lives, for better or for worse, whether we realize their impact on us or not. So, many of these influences are unnameable, but as I have thought more about it this week, I can identify by name some of those who have influenced me in important ways. And I'm sure that if you think about it, you can do the same. So I could name many of them individually, but instead, I have tried to distill some of the qualities of each person's character, things that have impressed me, that taken together, shape themselves into something of an ideal of character. Some are qualities I have had a little success in trying to emulate. Others are qualities in which I feel myself lacking, but which, at least on my best days, I recognize as a kind of ideal and goal worth striving towards. To identify them by name actually would be inappropriate, because it would sully a quality almost all of them seem to possess, which is an essential modesty about themselves. a genuine humility which values accomplishment in itself and not for any glory it may reflect upon their own performance. This is not to say they are without pride, but it is a quality of inner satisfaction that doesn't need to be buttressed by outward acclaim. It is the quality Robert Frost suggests in his poem, most of you I think know it, about choosing something like a star to guide our course, a kind of self-possession, an inner compass which keeps them on course, whatever the acclaim or blame that may come from the outside. And now for others' qualities. They are thoughtful. This is sometimes accompanied by unusual intelligence, but that is not the primary quality. I'm in agreement with Emerson, who said that character is higher than intellect. Thoughtfulness is the capacity to consider other perspectives and a willingness to learn from others. They are genuinely open people, secure enough in themselves not to need always to have things go their own way. They are respectful, polite, gracious, kind, humble virtues. And they are people of integrity. By this I mean that there is a congruity between their outward action and their inner being, a wholeness. They do not pretend to be something they are not. They accept themselves and others, including their own limitations, recognizing that all of us are limited in some ways. They believe in people's essential goodwill. They seek the best in others and try to offer it themselves. And since they expect to find that goodness, they often evoke it. In their presence, you feel your best self being drawn out. Partly it is simply that you want to be more like them. They possess a well-honed conscience, a refined and developed system of their own ethical boundaries and sense of right and wrong. Their preferred manner of moral instruction is by persuasion and example, and the influence of their actions speaks more loudly than any words. They have the courage of their own convictions and don't need the agreement of others to buoy them up. They are more forgiving of others than of themselves, but neither do they become mired in self-blame or self-recrimination. They speak no evil, even when they have been wounded, and they are all hurtable. But they don't bear grudges, at least not for long, and they believe it is possible to learn from one's errors. When you have failed them, they will let you know, and not complain, tell anyone else, or seek revenge. They are responsible and dependable in word and in action. They care about things beyond themselves and dedicate their lives to them. They will sacrifice of themselves for things and people they believe in. They are loyal, especially to people and often to institutions. They give of their time, their money, and themselves generously and without thought of personal reward. They take satisfaction in the successes of others and joy in the accomplishment of working with others. They can laugh at themselves. They look for the positive side of things, not expecting the world to be perfect, but believing it can always be improved. In the face of disappointment, they ask, what good can come of this? And especially, what good can I do? They are serene in the face of death, accepting it as part of life, inescapable and part of the natural order of things. And they will leave this world a little better than they found it, and their character will have left an indelible imprint on others which will not be erased by time. As Whitehead said, what should emerge from religion is individual worth of character. Following this thought, I believe that the ultimate test of a way of faith is to be judged by the quality of character it engenders in the lives of its adherents, not its buildings, not its monuments, not the institutions it endows, nor the other visible and notable evidences of its enterprise, but qualities of individual character, quality of soul. For this is the central struggle and endeavor of our lives, religiously and humanly: salvation by character.